Hey everybody, how's it going? I wanted to talk about some comic books and material that was very dear to me, and so I apologize. I have a fan rolling, and so there's going to be a little bit of uh, noise. It can't be helped. It's like getting up over 100 degrees here in the valley, and I'm sure that everybody out there, you're all dealing with the same kind of thing we are. So I hope you will understand when I say I've got to have a little bit of air moving in here while I have some studio lights on, and I've done as little as I can in that direction so that I can try to make some videos. Okay. So again, I apologize about the audio quality, but I will try to sit close to the camera so that the noise signal to noise ratio in the recording is better than it could be. Okay. The subject I wanted to talk about today, I'm not going to go into great depth on each character. I'm more so going to talk about a period of time of being a nerd and telling you about how these sorts of things came about. This show is largely due to, by the way, one comment in my comments section under the video. One of our viewers mentioned Warlord, which is a character from DC, and so this episode is sort of for you. I was born in the 1960s, so by the mid 70s, I was a preteen, and I had discovered, the Saturday Night Monster movie and all of that sort of good stuff. But we didn't have home video. We didn't have Netflix. We didn't have video stores. It just didn't exist. So if you wanted more of something that you did see in the cinema, such as Star Wars, or at the time Ralph Bakshi's version of Lord of the Rings, or then Rankin Bass also did Return of the King for American television. If you were into science fiction and if you were into fantasy stuff, outside of getting Alan Dean Foster's novelizations of the latest films that were hot, whether that was Aliens or Star Wars or anything like that, you really had to kind of turn to pulp magazines and comic books to get more of these characters in your life. So at the time, there was sort of an explosion in the mid 70s where they were basing characters off of properties which already existed, or they were slightly tweaking the storylines of characters that existed and then calling them something else. In the case of Warlord, it's a character who is testing a spy plane, and he's shot out of the air in his SR-71, I think it is, and crashes through a hole in the ice in the Arctic and finds a sort of Earth within Earth, where dinosaurs are still alive and tech combines with magic. These concepts were all, by the way, sort of pulp delivered back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, with characters like Flash Gordon, with characters like John Carter. Those books were called the Barsoom Chronicles. but it was the Princess of Mars and the Warlord of Mars and all of those John Carter novels that Burroughs did. There were a lot of comic books, and I'm going to start putting them up here now. I'm going to start with some comic books, by the way, that I found at Radar Toys, and I asked them if I could take some covers of some pictures of some covers while I was there shopping the other day. If you are going into a store, especially if it is a smaller or independent store like Radar Toys here in Salem, always try to always ask permission. I mean, even if they're like, yes, like the people at Radar.
Yes, you're in here all the time. Just do what you want and get out.
Anyway, when I was growing up, John Carter, Warlord of Mars, was this really great set of books, and they're all fairly thin. You can kind of read them in an afternoon almost. They are very sort of serialized, like Flash Gordon and things. Barsoon is actually what we call Mars, and John Carter was a person displaced at the end of the Civil War. He gets knocked out and wakes up on Mars. They did a lot of this stuff. They also sort of, they would do characters that everybody knows and are very grounded in reality, like Tarzan. But eventually, we started seeing more regular stuff and stuff that continues to this day, like Conan. But Conan at one time, prior to Arnold Schwarzenegger coming along in the 1980s and giving us those two films, was also something that if you wanted more of the character, you had to read the various novelizations, you had to go to comic books. So I thought it would be kind of neat to be able to show some of my books here as well, but all of the stuff that I've been showing here so far is it's stuff that I found at Radar. So if you're seeing something that you like up here, give them a call. But now that I've kind of flashed some of those by, and those are the ones that I don't have copies of necessarily, I have lots of other stuff to talk about here. When I was in the late 70s, early 80s, I was one of the early adopters of Dungeons and Dragons. Gary Gygax, the developer of the game, he lived in a town not too terribly far from where I grew up. And so we found his games and stuff, first editions of things and stuff like that in comic book shops that existed at the time. But, also at the time was when the third market, if you will, for comic books, stuff that wasn't DC, that wasn't Marvel, became something of a thing. These indie comics. And this is Eagle put out one called Nemesis the Warlock. This was one of those that I collected at the time. And it's some really fantastic artwork. It's crazy writing. And, we had really never seen anything like this. It was a revelation that someone could come up with something other than Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, and Iron Man, And again, this is where we got our sword and sorcery fix, our fantasy fix, was in comic books like these. This was a 7-issue run, and I'm not certain why, but I think I only have 6 issues of it, so this is the final one. for me anyway. And I've never been able to find the others, which is kind of tragic. But also at the time of reading Conan in the mid to late 70s and early 80s, I ran into an author, an English author named Michael Moorcock, who came up with a character called the Eternal Champion. And the Eternal Champion was probably one of my first conceptual multiverse things that sort of I let my brain soak into. I'm sure that DC and Marvel were doing something of this sort in 1980, but to me at the time, it was super fresh. It was very pulpy. A lot of magic, a lot of action, a lot of very colorful characters, and those were eventually turned from prose novels and pulp novels into comic book series. So characters like Moorcock's Elric, eventually I would see these popping up in various different comics. In fact, at the time, I remember that Elric made an appearance in a Marvel Conan comic. So, there's this. I mean, this is really the only way we could get our fix. And moving on to some of that from those originals, you get characters like the Black Knight. This character here carries an evil sword that sucks out men's souls and eventually rots the wielder from the inside and makes them a very dark character. Elric also wields a black soul, black souled sword, which removes people's souls from their bodies and turns its wielder evil eventually. Are you seeing some similarities in characters that Marvel went ahead with in the 80s and 90s? DC was shoehorning characters. This is the Sword of the Atom. They gave the Atom a sword and shield for a little while and had him duking it out with tiny people from a microverse. All of these eventually is what created the Marvel universe, really. If it wasn't for all of this sort of stuff, no one would care about Lord of the Rings. Here's an interesting tangent. My first editions of the Lord of the Rings was a paperback box set that I received from some relatives for Christmas. And they have very interesting covers on them. They were done in watercolor. And the cover of The Hobbit shows Bilbo Baggins straddling a barrel coming out of the dark forest. It's part of the book, right? I was observed carrying this book, and immediately it was under question as to where my sexuality lay. The other kids asking, "What kind of are you?" This was one of my first experiences with bullying and prejudice, really. And it was a really upsetting experience. I got sort of beat up and hassled over a copy of The Hobbit. And also at the time, I think my brother would pick up copies of Iron Man that I had in my room or whatever. And he would do that thing where you put it up to your lips and it sounds like you're ripping the paper. I was bullied for Lord of the Rings, and I was beat up by my brother, which that would have happened anyway with anything. That's what American brothers do to each other. But funny enough, around 2003, my brother called me and said, "Hey, would you want to go to the movies with me?" And I said, "Sure, man." Really hadn't done it before in my life, but we were in close proximity. And so I said, "What do you want to go see?" He said, "I want to go see this Iron Man movie, but I don't know anything about it." And I figure you used to read those comics when we were kids. I was like, "Okay, sure. I'll go with you to see the character that you used to torment me and act like you were tearing up my books. Sure." And the other thing that I think is hilariously funny is that I know that those guys whom I was neighbors with and etc. in the late 70s and early 80s, when I was in junior high school and then going into high school, I know that those dudes probably don't remember beating me up over a book cover, but I do know that those guys all went on to have kids, and then Lord of the Rings, the movies, came out and became super popular with action figures and card games and books and comics and all that other stuff. And those guys who challenged my love of comic books and my love of Lord of the Rings all had to take their kids to the Marvel movies, and they all had to buy copies of Lord of the Rings for their kids for Christmas. It's kind of funny how things in the universe will pay off. It will. I call it the great cosmic rubber band, and it makes all energies equal over time. So be careful what you're making fun of today, because tomorrow it may be something that you or someone you know loves a lot, and you'll be involved. Another character of Robert Howard's was Solomon Kane. Solomon Kane is sort of a Puritan of sorts, a reformed pirate, and he took a very moral stance then on killing and corruption. A very different character than Conan, and also interesting. And they eventually made a film for Solomon Kane as well, which is not too shabby, honestly. But anyway, this is a limited run from Marvel of Solomon Kane that I have. I love the artwork. I need to pick up issues 4 and 6, I think. So I've still got a couple of pockets, but the sword wielding, witch killing person has always interested me. I've always enjoyed things of this nature, and so I have a lot of it. You want to see more? Yeah. Ooh, this is my good stuff. And by the way, it's so warm I'm not wearing pants. Now we're digging into some of the more rare, older, and related books that I have. So I'm just going to flip these past. I do have one of the first editions of Tarzan put out by Marvel. As you can see, that's issue number 2 up there when they were 30 cents. I have a couple copies of this actually, in fact, and so if you're really into it, let me know. Maybe we can trade. But Marvel was putting out a ton of this stuff. Some of it caught on, some of it were characters that continued and or popped up in other people's books, but some of them just sort of disappeared. Just sort of, well, we're gonna try this. And so you get characters like Man Wolf here, who is a fantastic looking character, I gotta say. And you always gotta have the buxom ladies in there. This is one of my favorite sub-brands of Marvel, by the way. Marvel Premier put out some really weird books, especially in the 1970s. That was given to me by Andre, and I'm not gonna show it. Oh, I will. I don't know. I haven't even looked at it yet. She's got a sword, though. Honestly. Balder the Brave. I believe, if I'm looking at this pricing correctly, 75 cents. This was issue number 1. 75 cents probably puts it in the mid 80s, early 80s, somewhere in there. But Balder the Brave was also Balder the Betrayed. Right? Yeah. You don't care about Balder. Let's move on. This is one that I picked up recently, actually, up in Oregon City. There's a fantastic little store up there, and this one I think I paid a few bucks for. But Thing in the Crypt is a classic Conan story, and this is issue 92, so it's fairly deep in there. Also, Kane the Conqueror, Solomon Kane was in a Marvel Premier series known as The Mark of Cain. As you can see, lots more swords, lots more swashbuckling, lots more buxom women. It was a different time. King Conan. There were probably at least 4 or 5, I think, different titles of Conan running at any given time. Also, sometimes both DC and Marvel would be trying to vie for the same characters. Here's some of the John Carter Warlord of Mars translations that they did for Marvel. These start out sort of founded in the original Burroughs stories, but eventually they did sort of branch out into their own stories. But I love these because this is sort of the way I pictured a lot of the Barsoom series as I read it as a kid, because of these comic books. But, with things like this, sometimes they caught on. Like John Carter ran for lots of issues. I can't really recall how many, and I don't have them all here in my collection yet. I picked these up for a really good price from a dealer that I was working with at a flea market a couple of years ago, probably before COVID. And so I was getting these books for a really good price. They have since, at least locally, they have since kind of jumped up in price. And of course, I do not mean to artificially stimulate any market when I'm showing stuff, but sometimes I feel like I kind of screw myself by reminding people that these obscure titles exist and that they are lots of fun. They got great colorful artwork, and they're from like this wonderful period of comic books, which I probably withdrew into comic books quite a bit given my social standing as a youth. I was not as my son is. He's always been very athletic and very coordinated. I'm a ginger, so things are rather different for me. Where others are, photogenic and athletic, I am better in the dark, in the rear with the gear, and just ready for the kick me sign. Just go ahead and tape it on. Okay, it's where I call home. So all of this, and I've created a huge mess of comic books around me. All of this, and I apologize that I do not, off the top of my head, recall who had spoken of DC's Warlord. But this was a book that I picked up every time I could, and as you'll see, like, the numbers jump all over the place because it was not one that I found on the wire rack very often back in the 70s and 80s. It reminded me a lot of the John Carter stuff, which was very dear to me. And so this was a very natural transition for me in terms of picking it up and knowing what was going on, even though some of my books jump 10 numbers. I have since bought a few copies here at local places. I found a honey hole of early comics at a fairly decent price. So some of these later ones that you're seeing now are ones that I've just picked up and I have not even read yet. I'm really looking forward to it. Again, because one of our viewers brought it up in our comments. So I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for any creator whose stuff you enjoy or are digging. Hit the subscribe button and comment. The commenting, it lets me know what you'd like to see more of, less of. My wife really digs this cat on the cover of this. When I was picking these up, my wife was talking to the woman behind the counter who was ringing them up for me. And they were like, "Oh, I like the cat. I like the cat." I like the cat too. Please leave a comment. It helps me to know that, and it helps us with the ever elusive YouTube algorithm. I'm sorry. I'm starting to lose my ability to speak and think. And that's probably okay because this is the last issue I'm going to put up here. And now I have to go put all of the screen inlays in and shoot an opening montage and add music and do all the other technical stuff that you don't care about. All you want is good shows, so I'm trying to bring it to you. I'm trying. So folks, thank you very much for coming out here to the Monkey Shine Lab. If you like what you see, Black Axe. Oh, Black Axe. If you like what you see, seek some help. But in between then, please head on back here and come see us again. We try to post just about every day, but it's been so warm, folks. It's been so bloody warm here that I haven't really wanted, none of us have really wanted to do much of anything. Anyway, thanks a lot for coming out to the Monkey Shine Lab, and we will see you all again very, very soon. Thanks.